Folks, welcome to another edition of a Profit.co webinar. I am very happy to introduce our panelist, Amélie Desrosiers, who has joined us from Enerkem. And we have an amazing topic today, and a very different topic. Right? This is really about how to communicate transformation. Right? So the topic today is communicating transformation, how Enerkem uses OKRs to align teams and inspire progress. Right? Enerkem is a favorite organization of mine. Right? They are a very purpose-driven organization, and it's very interesting to see today, how they have actually connected communication strategies with business goals, and how they've used OKRs to bring clarity, focus, and motivation to to the transformation efforts, and how to create a culture where employees feel informed, inspired, and involved. We have never done a topic exclusively on these areas, right? Communication, culture, as part of the OKR-led business transformation. And we have the best person to talk about this. Right? Amélie is a director of communications and strategy coordination at Enerkem, right? So, welcome again, Amélie. Great to have you here today. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Senthil. Very happy to be here.
Okay, great. So, maybe to begin with, Amélie, it'll be great to hear from you, right, about you, your career, and of course, Enerkem, right, the organization, the purpose, what you do, right, for the folks who may not have heard of you. Yeah.
Awesome. So I'm an experienced leader with 15 years in management, communication, and strategic execution. I focused most of my career in mission-driven organization, and my goal is to turn organizational strategies and goals into concrete action. So that's in this mindset that I joined Enerkem 3 years ago. And so Enerkem is a technology leader in biofuel and circular chemicals technology. So we transform wasted material into low carbon fuels and low carbon solutions. And we commercialize our technology around the world, especially in Europe these days. So it's a Montreal-based organization. I saw that someone is joining us from Montreal today. That's good. And it's been around since 2000. So it's a pretty strong organization. And my role in all of my career was to advise executives to build a strong cross-functional bridges between teams and inspire employees to take action around shared projects. And I specialize in complex contexts, so that's good. So when Enerkem needed to find a new OKR captain, I quickly raised my hand and embarked enthusiastically in this adventure, along with the great team at Profit.co who helped us in this journey.
Okay, that's awesome. So, Amélie, I think you have a very distinct background. We have seen a lot of OKR captains coming from strategy or the PMO organization, right? And sometimes, of course, the people organization. It's great to see somebody from, marketing, communication, doing it, because communication is such an important part of any OKR-led transformation, right? So it'll be great to hear your perspective. Now, to begin with, let's go back to the very beginning of your OKR-led transformation exercise. It'll be great to know what were the problems you were trying to solve with OKRs, right? Was it, alignment, better clarity, more employee engagement, or something else? What were the problems you were trying to solve? Yeah.
Many, I would say, as you said, alignment, clarity, engagement, all good answers. I would say, so when I joined Enerkem, they were already using OKRs, or what they called OKRs, which as I learned after the training with Profit.co, wasn't the proper way to do it. It looked more like Excel spreadsheets with hundreds of lines of tasks and projects. So it wasn't really focused on outcome, in my perspective. So when we decided to move from these Excel spreadsheets into Profit.co, we took a proper training on what real OKRs should look like, and that's when we started shifting our mindset. So at that point, alignment became very critical. So that was one thing we wanted to help. We needed everyone moving in the same direction with a shared understanding of our priorities across team and across levels. So that was one thing. But I would also add a very important point, which is prioritization. So we were at a point of our business journey where we really needed a way to focus our effort on what would truly make a difference for Enerkem and not focus on multiple things that were probably more nice to have than need to have. So the OKR framework really helped us in that prioritization, in the alignment. And I would also say that the transparency that we were able to deploy through Profit.co played a key role because having a platform that makes all the OKRs accessible to everyone at any time, where you can easily see the progress, easily understand how it's structured and how it influences at the corporate level or the team level. So that really helped in terms of so the transparency to get everybody involved and engaged in the success of our OKRs. So I would say we were really tackling many things, but alignment and prioritization would probably be the top ones.
Sure, that's great. And Enercom, as I understand, is a very highly technical and innovation-driven organization, right? So you
Yeah.
are literally converting trash, to fuel, right?
Mhm.
And for such, and a lot of PhDs are working there, right? So with that sort of a background, right? And when you have a corporate communication lens,
Mhm.
what really surprised you when you first introduced OKRs to a technical organization like Enercom?
Yeah. I think the biggest surprise to me was the shifting the mindset from task and project focused thinking into result oriented objectives. So, in my opinion, that was the biggest shift we had to make. We were listing everything we wanted or needed to do instead of focusing on what we wanted to achieve and what we truly would truly drive the success of the organization. So yeah, teams were naturally focused on building, delivering, innovating rather than the outcome of those efforts. So that was a big discussion we had at every level of the organization, I have to say. So shifting that mindset was kind of a surprise for me. I also had another one that I've encountered quite quickly is the difficulty or the challenge to define meaningful and trackable key results for certain support function, such as legal, accounting, even sometimes communications. So these support functions, they are highly dependent on the needs and priorities of other teams, and so they are not fully in control of their agenda. And we wanted to to strike the right balance between allowing that flexibility and allowing them to support the organization, but still finding metrics that were both measurable and reflective of their impact. So I think these two things were what surprised me the most in starting with the OKRs. And if I can add, there it's not a surprise because we have a very highly engaged team. But what was quite it's still surprising to see and encouraging to see is the strong desire from employees to understand the OKR. So as soon as we started clarifying and explaining the OKRs, I could truly see people being more engaged and involved and interested in that process, which wasn't there when I first joined in the old ways of doing OKRs. So that was yeah, these were
Okay.
my first thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's pretty insightful. Particularly the fact that you had to do a mindset shift, right? From to truly
Yes.
outcome based one. It'll be great to know how you did it, as we go along. But uh,
Mhm.
while I'm before moving on to the next question, I wanted to inform the folks who have joined the session today that, please feel free to share your questions, right? We are going to have a Q&A session at the end, and sometimes we might even pick up some questions right in the middle, right? If we find relevant, insightful questions. So please share your questions in the Q&A, right? Okay. So with that, moving on, you began the whole process by co-creating the corporate OKRs with the executive team, right? Where a lot of debates can happen. You may also have to sell the whole idea to some people in the corporate, right, where they may be sitting on the fence. How was the co-creation process? How did the whole process of setting up company level OKRs happen?
That's a good question. So it was a very interesting process, to say the least. Some executives were immediately excited to focus on a more result-oriented journey and were already in line with that mindset. Some others were a little bit more hesitant or didn't see how it related to their own team's OKR. So we work closely with each individual to make sure that they understood and asking them the right question. To me, that journey was really about the coaching and the discussion that we had together to make everybody's mindset evolve, and focusing and asking those who were already in that mindset to contribute, to bring everybody on board. So I can say that 2 years later, it's been 2 years that we've been doing that. Everybody is now fully on board and and it feels equally comfortable with OKRs at the leadership level. And so again, the biggest discussion was around shifting the mindset, but I think we got there. And I also noticed that some executives or some OKR champions were really good at executing that mindset in terms of being results oriented, for others. And when it came to their own OKRs, they were challenged a bit more and reverting back to the task and project oriented. So again, that emphasized the co-creation importance and the challenge between peers and the iteration process that is so important in the OKR creation.
Great. Thanks, Emily. And we have a question, the first question, from one of the attendees, and it's there in the Q&A, right? What kind of resources did you make available to the organization to help them onboard OKRs across the board?
A very good question. So I would say a lot of coaching and training. So we had training sessions that were recorded and accessible afterwards, both on how to create an OKR, but also how to use the Profit.co platform. Because in our journey, it was done side by side. So training materials, and I personally with other OKR champions spent a lot of time coaching, and I think this is definitely a key, to be available to people, answer their question, take the time to adapt, and explain the OKR framework and mindset with the example of their teams and what they want to achieve. So this I have to say it took a lot of time, but it was a really good investment because 2 years, we just finished our new OKR cycle. I can say that everybody is now much more comfortable in this process. So, training, documentation, and coaching were the resources we made available.
Sure. That's pretty insightful. Thank you, Emily. Now, when you first introduced OKRs, right, there are some people who might think that, hey, that is yet another management framework, right?
Yes.
There could be a bit of a fatigue, particularly if they've seen quite a few, management ideas being floated around and frameworks being floated around. How did you really explain to them that, this is, very different and, it's going to be very, very purpose driven, right? So how did you go about that task?
Yeah, that's a very important point because it's always a risk, for sure, to have, and I have to say I've heard it. Oh, it's another management tool. But something that made a big difference was the way we explained OKRs and explained Profit.co. So we focused on three things. The first one was OKRs will help us focus on what truly matters for the organization rather than tracking everything. So again, in the same mindset that we have to shift. We people were used to track everything that they do, but now we wanted them to focus their efforts on the OKRs and the priorities that would really drive success for the organization. So that was the first way of talking about OKRs. Then we refer to it as a way to connect day-to-day work to real outcomes. So again, focusing on the outcome rather than the task. And finally, it was a way for us to create clarity and alignment across the organization, across team, and across the different level of leadership. So I think mentioning it like that really made people realize that it was a way to focus our effort, to align our effort, rather than just a reporting tool or a management tool.
Great. That's pretty insightful. Thank you, Emily. Now, you do, communicate with your folks all the time, right, as a communication director.
Yes.
Now, how did OKRs change the way, strategic priorities were communicated, right, across Enerkem?
In many ways. So when we started using OKR properly, if I can say, because they were using it before, we had to simplify our strategic priorities. And I think that was one of the biggest shift is focusing on less priorities and the biggest one. So that made it easier for everyone to understand what we needed to achieve. And Profit.co also made those priorities visible to everyone, which created a shared reference point across the organization. So that also changed the way we communicated across functions. And so once the OKRs were clear, measurable, and properly communicated across the organization, again, I work closely with all the department heads to help them translate those priorities into their own context and ensure team understood not only what the priorities were, but also how their work was contributing to them.
Great. Excellent. Thanks. There are some more questions in the chat. We will come to that
Okay.
later, right? But
Okay.
as we move on to the next topic, right? You are responsible for both communications and culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, how did OKRs help reinforce accountability without hurting trust or morale?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a fine line to walk on. So again, to me, it really comes down to how OKRs are introduced and communicated. So from the start, we were very careful to position OKRs as a tool for clarity, alignment, focus, and not as a performance monitoring or control mechanism. So we have other ways to evaluate performance and monitor that. But here, the OKRs, the goal was to really focus our efforts and align our priorities. So we were very transparent about the fact that OKRs are also a learning tool. So it's a way for us to make sure that we're on track and to see our progress and not a way to penalize teams for missing targets. So the conversation was more around progress and the insights we could learn from OKRs rather than on you achieved it or not. So we were able to make adjustment as needed and see the evolution. And I think we went from looking at OKRs twice a year and versus following it on a more regular basis and learning from them and adjusting from year to year. So that really, I think that helps to keep the morale and without penalizing people.
Got it. Got it. So, as you started, implementing OKRs, did you see any shift in how employees engaged with their leadership? Right? Once the OKRs became visible and measurable, um, you
Mhm.
know, how did you see the employee engagement? And are there any specific moments that stood out?
Yeah, there are many. And I would say that, yes, once the OKR become more visible, measurable, and they are clearly understood by employees, what I've seen them is starting to ask more questions and really wanting to understand why we chose that OKRs, why we chose that metrics, why we chose that target, and how can their work contribute to it. Even last week, I was in a meeting with a group of people on a project, and they were presenting their OKRs for the year. And that took the longest time in the agenda because people really wanted to understand how we'll get there. What's the plan? Why did we choose this metric versus that metric? And really wanted to understand how all of these OKR will impact the success of the project in this case. So that was a very insightful discussion, and I can see that when teams ask questions and get engaged and involved in a discussion, that's really when we can tell that the OKR framework and mindset has made its way throughout the organization. So seeing people challenge and ask questions to me is a clear moment of the engagement employees have with the framework.
Yeah, I think that's such a critical, I would say, insight and very crucial insight, right? The fact that employee engagement has improved and people are asking questions, right? Why did we
Yes.
choose this particular objective? Or why
Hmm.
is this key result important for us, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's really shows a level of engagement, which
Yeah.
any OKR captain would love to have, right?
Yes.
Instead of being a top-down exercise, one-way exercise, you are really seeing a lot of thoughtful questions coming from the people who are actually executing work, right? I would say that's really, I'm sure that would have felt, very good, right? To see
Oh,
that level of
absolutely. Yeah,
of
and if I can add, it really shows the shared ownership of OKRs, where it's not just a top-down now approach. Everybody owns the OKRs of their team or project or the organization. So yeah, it was really good to see.
Yeah. So, folks, I think one of the key insights here, as I can see it, Emily, is that there is a psychological safety in the environment,
Yes.
right? And such a
Yes.
critical part of the culture where people feel very comfortable to ask, hey, why have we chosen this objective? Why is this even
Yes.
important for us? How
Yeah.
is my work going to contribute to the company level goal, right? So it truly speaks about the level of psychological safety that exists at Enercom and
Hmm. Hmm.
probably, a good lesson for all of us, to what to aspire for, right? When it comes to the prevailing culture, right, in any organization. So that's a great
Yes.
insight. Thank you for sharing that. Now,
Yeah.
moving on, you know, a lot of people look at internal satisfaction and engagement as soft metrics, right? There are hard
Hmm.
metrics, where you have sales targets, product to be released, products to be developed and released, or you have, number of leads to be generated by marketing. But then whatever you are talked about today are what some people would perceive as soft metrics, right? So how did
Hmm.
you use OKRs to make these outcomes visible and measurable?
Yeah. Well, I personally strongly believe that employee satisfaction and engagement are foundational metrics. So if you have that, that enables the organization to achieve all other OKRs. So in my opinion, that these are the most critical ones, but I might be a bit biased on that. So if our employees are not engaged or not satisfied, or if they don't understand how their work contributes to the organization's success or don't feel valued, the performance will suffer and the results will become much more difficult to achieve. So that belief translated directly into action because one of my first wins, if I can say, as a strategic coordinator at Enerkem was to explicitly include people-related metrics at the corporate OKRs. So they were there before, but at the team level. But now, since the past 2, 3 years now, we've been having people-related metrics at the corporate OKRs, and everybody understand how important it is to have employees being engaged, and we continue to track that, and it just takes on more and more importance across the organization. So I think that the OKR framework really allowed us to put that, and my push for it too really allowed us to put that front and center of our strategy. And now it's a discussion that happens at all level of the organization, and that is tracked and important also for the leadership team.
Okay, that's great. That's pretty insightful. We have a couple of questions, a few questions from Ashwin in the audience. We will come to that, right? It is there in the chat, right? So maybe after the next question we can pick up, one or two from there, and then we can try to answer. So As you were implementing OKRs, you were doing all these right things, focusing on the soft metrics. Now, from your folks, right, what signals told you that OKRs were actually influencing behavior and they are not just dashboards or reports?
Mhm. I saw a few. I would say the clearest signal, in my opinion, was starting to hear OKRs being mentioned spontaneously by people outside of the leadership team or the OKRs champion. So whether it's in small team discussion or in corridor discussion, when I started hearing people refer to OKRs spontaneously, I really, really felt this shared ownership and this understanding of the framework. So it became clear that it was part of the thinking and not just in parallel.
Okay.
Another strong signal that I've seen was, and we talked about this earlier, having people asking questions and asking questions like, how does this project relate to our OKRs? Or how will this contribute to the organization's success? So it was a different type of questions that people were asking. So I could really see the shift in their mind that we were focused on achieving our OKRs and the rest needed to make sense in that framework. Otherwise, we would have to make decisions to not move forward with the X or Y initiative. So yeah, I think that when teams start challenging OKRs themselves and questioning our objectives or metrics, like I mentioned, it's a strong signal that it's been influencing behavior and it's not just a dashboard or a report somewhere.
Sure. I think that's very valuable. Thank you, Emily. So if we can look at a couple of questions
Sure.
in the webinar chat, right? Specifically, Ashwin has asked, quite a few questions. We'll try to pick up one or two to begin with. So I think the first question is, in which stage of product development or platform development, do OKRs need to be defined?
Hmm.
Uh,
That's a very good question. I would personally, and I'm not the expert in all OKRs matter, but I would say that it's at every stage because every stage has an objective and an outcome that wants to be achieved. So, and it's the same thing in our organization. So we have teams that are focused on executing, delivering our projects, delivering our technology. We also have teams who are more on the research and development area. So everyone has OKRs and we measure the outcome that we want to achieve at every stage of the development. So I don't know if that answers your question, but on my side, I think that for every stage, we need to have an outcome and we can create OKRs that are aligned to where we want to go at the end of a cycle.
Yeah, great. That's a very useful insight. Now, there's another question that he has asked, the third question, which is, how frequently do OKRs need to be measured, right? To
Mm-hmm.
ensure that we are traveling in the right direction, right? I think he's referring to the check-in frequency, right? Check-in and
Yeah.
reviews, right? Maybe if you can share some insights on what you do at Enerkem, that will be helpful. Yeah.
That's a very good question. And I would start to say that it depends on the organization and the business that you're in. At Enerkem, our cycle is more long-term driven. So our projects are long-term, our innovations are long-term. So in some other businesses, it moves very, very fast and you can see progress every week. In our case, the progress takes more time before it can be seen and measured. So we decided to do yearly OKR. So we set them at the beginning of the year for the whole year. We do monthly check-in. So the last Friday of each month, we do the check-in on our progress. And we do quarterly reviews with leadership. So every month, the business champion of the OKRs, they will do their check-ins, see where the progress is. Depending on the teams, they do a monthly review with their own team to see where they're at. And at the end of a quarter, we do a review with the leadership team so that they know where we are in terms of progress for both the corporate level and the departmental level. But I would say it really depends on the business you're in because I've seen example where it's quarterly OKRs and the check-in is every week. And so I would say take the time to think about your business and the reality of your business and how quickly things move. And I think that will answer probably your question.
Thank you very much. Now, moving on in terms of a very important topic, which is really the executive sponsorship, right? Wanted to
Mhm.
get your feedback. What role did executive sponsorship play, and how did you keep the leaders consistently engaged beyond kickoff?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I have to say we were pretty lucky at Enerkem because right from the start, our COO was a big champion of OKRs and of Profit.co and wanted us to focus and change our mindset to results oriented. And outcome oriented. So we had that support from the CEO right from the beginning, and our CEO was also very supportive. So both of them were fully on board with that journey. Some other executives took a little bit more time to get used to it and to be familiar with the framework. But it's absolutely crucial because and I think that would be where I would start if I was to do it again at another company, is to make sure that they understand where we want to go, what it's going to change for us, and how to implement it in the organization. So clearly that was a key factor for us. One thing that also helped us in that implementation was the training we received from Profit.co on what good OKRs look like. It really helped us, and even those of us who were already familiar with OKRs in the past, this training kind of put us all on the same page and helped us to have also, so executives were trained and we had champions who were trained as well. So we had multiple people who could spread the good news and the best practices across the organization. And beyond kickoff, what we did to sustain engagement was integrating the OKR discussion in the leadership already existing tools. So whether they have weekly meetings, so we talked about OKRs, progress quarterly in that meeting, working with executive individually and their teams to create their OKRs. So it's a matter of keeping it active and alive. And with the quarterly review, it keeps that top of mind. And so for our executives, they have both the corporate OKRs to follow and also their teams. So on both fronts, it's a matter of repeating the information and providing personal coaching and support with their teams.
It's very helpful. Thank you, Emily. Now, a lot of interesting questions coming up. We will come back to it slightly later, but moving on, how did you integrate OKRs into existing communication rhythms, right?
Mm-hmm.
Town halls, leadership updates, right? How did you do that without overwhelming teams? Yeah.
Yeah, that's that. Well, I think here the key, and you've said it, is integration rather than addition. So we at Enerkem, we have two town halls per year. We also have on the month where we don't have town halls, I would say every 2 months we have leadership updates. So we chose to integrate that OKR discussion, the corporate OKR discussion, in terms of sharing the draft and then sharing the final ones and then sharing the progress and the results. We decided to integrate these discussions into those already existing communication channels. And at the team level, they also decided to integrate it into their team's discussion. So whether it's weekly team meetings once a month when they do the review of the check-ins, or monthly reviews with their team. So for each team, it's a little bit different, but our message was really to integrate this into the big picture and into their already existing communication channel rather than adding that on top of everything else. So I think that really helped to keep it easier, I would say, and to facilitate that discussion.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, which is all of us can follow, is not to overload people with additional communication, but really integrate that with existing communication channels, right? So that it
Yes.
really feels that's integrated, and this is the way of the new way of work rather than something which is additional and extra, right? So that's really a very good and very practical insight, right? So thank you for that, Emily.
My
Now,
pleasure.
moving on, probably into the more from a reflection perspective, right? I just wanted to ask you, probably a couple of things, right? How do you, coach leaders and managers to talk about OKRs in a way that, really builds belief and ownership and not just compliance? What was your approach?
Yes, that's very important. I think that the message that was the most successful in my coaching with leaders was to talk about OKRs through the lens of their team's success. Not just what they needed to achieve, but how would they describe the success of their team at the end of the year or our cycle for OKRs. So instead of asking them to list everything they had to do and explain their OKRs, we really talked about what is their team trying to achieve? Why does it matter? What will be the impact on the rest of the organization? What will be the impact if they don't do it also? Because that's important. Everything seems important, but what if we don't do it? So when I talked at the beginning about prioritization, these are also the discussions we had to have. And that really helped to shift the mindset and to because all our leaders they want to see their teams succeed, and so talking about the success of the team and how would other people evaluate that their team contributed to the organization and was successful, that really helped to change the perspective and the mindset on that.
Sure. Thank you. Those are very practical insights. Thanks for sharing them. And we'll come to the questions in a moment. Folks, keep your questions coming. But probably one of the very, very important question which I had was, for communication or HR leaders who are in the audience, right? What do you think is the very practical first step they should take, right? To turn OKRs into a cultural lever rather than a reporting tool.
Hmm. Oh, that's a key question. So I'll skip the obvious steps of that we already talked about securing leadership support, training executives and coaches, or choosing an easy to use tool like Profit.co, for example, that would fit your business needs. In my opinion, what matters the most is getting genuinely excited about OKRs. So I know this sounds soft, but in our business, it really made the difference. So being excited and getting others to be excited too about OKRs. I think as communications and HR leaders, or any OKR champion for the matter, we have to be ambassadors. And the energy and the enthusiasm of the ambassadors plays a big role. And I can share an example with you where at the beginning of the implementation, I worked with one of my colleagues whose name is Dominique. I'm not sure if he's on the, on the call today, but I worked with him to bring him along in that framework and to define his OKRs. And he was I don't think he would blame me to say he was resistant and hesitant at the beginning. And and I spent a lot of time with him. And a few years later, a few months later, he became one of the most reliable and accurate person to do his check-in. Every time it was on target. And when we did the next cycle to create OKR, I could really see that he got it and he understood the importance. And in a conversation we had a few months ago, he shared that it's the enthusiasm I brought to the table that made him more open and convinced, and the fact that I believed in it and I took the time to explain to him, be there when he had any questions, and adapt it to his team's needs and reality. It really for him was a big driver of his engagement with the OKR framework and the tool. So that's why I would say it's really important to be excited ourselves, and the Profit.co team was there to support me on that journey. But and you've mentioned it at the beginning, it's rare that we have communications people talking about OKRs. But throughout my career, engagement and alignment have been my focus. And to me, the OKRs are not just a framework; it's a way to connect people around shared priorities, and it's a way to create alignment and to create engagement. So that's why I've been excited about OKR ever since I've started with Enerkem, and continue to be excited about it.
Oh, that's an amazing insight. Thanks a lot for sharing that, Emily. Now let's take probably a couple of questions right from the audience. One, there's a question from Sukran, right? And the question is, it's there on the Q&A panel, right? There are daily or frequent tasks people are doing,
Mm-hmm.
and tracking them can contribute to the OKR progress, right? Tasks, right? Not the key results themselves, right? So his question is, how do you have a system to do this, or how do you even do this?
That's a very great question, and we had a discussion on that just a few weeks ago. So there's a project we want to put in place, and we were debating with here are the milestones or the tasks that we need to achieve to implement that project. But in the end, we decided to measure the result, and the result was to reduce from 12 to 6 days the number of time it took to deliver XYZ report. So in Profit.co, and I'm not this is not a sales pitch for Profit.co, but in Profit.co you can track both the result and the outcome you want to achieve, and also the tasks that are related to the project. So for the leader, they can see the task and the progress that is made, but ultimately the team remains focused on what we want to achieve. So if the tasks need to change, or the timeline needs to be adjusted, or we decide that another approach is more beneficial throughout the year, we can do this, because our objective is to reduce from 12 to 6 days the number of time that it takes to deliver XYZ report. So I do think that there's a way to continue to track tasks for people who are doing that daily, and for managers to see the evolution of the progress. But the KR remains on the outcome and not the task.
Okay. Thank you, Emily. That was very helpful. Probably two more questions. One right above what Sukran had asked, right, from Boyan. In your view, Emily, do you believe the OKR methodology is as useful for smaller organizations as for larger ones?
And that's a very good question. I would say it is, because alignment is, going back to what I said, to me, OKR is about aligning people around the priorities and what will make the success of the organization. So even in small teams, it is important to be aligned. And sometimes in these discussions, we realize that we think we're aligned, but in fact, we're not. So having these discussions and make sure that it's clear, it's on paper, it's visible by everybody. This is really helpful to bring that shared understanding, shared ownership, the transparency, and to make sure that people are aligned. And when I said that the team has started to use, oh, how does this relate to OKRs, and starting to challenge new priorities that would come up and that are don't seem aligned. Yeah, to me, it's when the success of the organization is really shared amongst everybody. And I think that in smaller organization, it's even more important to have a clear alignment, because there are less resources. So in all organization, I strongly believe alignment is critical, and OKRs is a good framework or methodology to do so.
Yeah, it's pretty valuable and very practical. And probably the last question, Ashwin has asked a bunch of questions. We'll try to answer one more. And, Ashwin, our team will definitely get back to you. Thanks a lot for all your questions. So the last question he has asked is on and this is available in the webinar chat, right? What are the do's and don'ts of, defining OKRs, right? I think he wants to know,
Mm-hmm.
what do you really are the do's and don'ts? And specifically also has a question on the number, right? Do you recommend
Ah.
five objectives, 5 key results, what are your numbers, go-to numbers, right? Those are his questions.
That's a very good question. And I believe Profit.co has some good cheat sheets that we use at the beginning of the do's and don'ts. So the first one I would say is it comes back to what I said, is to focus on the outcome and not get into the trap of listing all the projects and priorities. I'll start by answering your question on the recommendation of the number. I would say that 5 is the absolute maximum of OKRs, of objectives that I would allow our teams to work on. Between 3 and 4 would be more realistic. And in each objectives, same thing, from 3 to 5 KRs would be the maximum. This year, we decided for some corporate objectives, we decided to have only one key result. And the goal was really to make sure that everybody understood that this was the clear focus. It doesn't mean we won't do the rest, but what really drives the success of our organization this year is this one key results by objective. So I would say the less you have, the more focused you are. But beyond 5 objective or 5 key results, it's way too much. So in the do's and don'ts, you have the quantity, you have the quality, the way you write it. But if I can add, one of the don'ts overall on the methodology is to not try to be perfect. This is a learning tool, but this is also a learning process. So I would say the first OKR we created were good, but not great. And then the year after, they were better. And then they get even better as the team get engaged. So getting started is the first do, I would say, don't wait to be perfect, to have it all sorted out. Try it, learn from it, share your learnings with your teams and champions and leadership team, and you'll get better through the time, and people will own the process as well. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think absolutely. It was a very insightful, and thanks a lot, Emily, for sharing some very practical insights, right, on a topic which we don't see being addressed a lot in the open, right? So it was very insightful. Thank you very much. And I also wanted to thank the audience, right, for coming out with some amazing questions. My apologies if we have not answered everything. Right, we are running out of time. We will absolutely try to answer your questions offline, right? But again, a great session. Thank you very much, Emily. Thank you, audience. So with that, let's close. All right. Any closing words, Emily?
I would repeat, get excited about OKRs. This is a great framework for alignment and for engaging the employees, and have fun.
Okay, great. Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
Emily. Right. And
And
thank
thank
you,
you,
everyone.
Senthil.
Thank you.